Hey everyone, hello. So this talk is on spiritual awakening and your natal chart. Um, so right now we have Mercury in Pisces, and it's actually squaring my own natal Mercury-Neptune. And so I was at a total loss in terms of what to speak about. And my Mercury-Neptune's in Sagittarius, so it's always about sort of being spontaneous and authentic. So I decided the what feels most real for me is to create this space to share just some thoughts that are very alive in me right now, just about the spiritual journey, and to be connecting that to the natal chart. And I absolutely invite participation and questions and just, your own reflections along the way. The first thing that I want to say, I often find that along this journey, really almost 99% of the time for all of us, our consciousness tends to be focused predominantly on very, very unique and personal concerns. Of course, that makes sense. You're you with your karma, your journey, and I'm me with my stuff. But it's interesting that I'm not thinking about the things that you're thinking about most of the time, that I'm not focused on the specific dilemmas. Yet when we remove ourselves from the content of that which occupies our consciousness, and we look underneath the content, we find that we're all actually exactly on the same boat, right? We're all going to be experiencing the vibration of worry or concern or anticipation or fear or dread or regret. There are universal energetic experiences and emotions that we all experience. The unique specific content, and she reminded everyone to mute yourself, the specific content of our concerns is very, very individuated. In fact, it's diverse, and the diversity of things that we have to potentially worry about is pretty beautiful when you think about that with all the human beings, there's like an endless artistic array, a palette of possible concerns that never ends. It's like there's always potentially something because of the immense individuality of each of our own journeys. But the vibrational essence underneath it is pretty much all the same for us all. And something that I've been thinking about and practicing is, in a way, acknowledging the things that feel so important and so real to me, and granting myself permission to remember that this is such a small moment, and that I do not have the complete perspective of what's really going on, that I lack the objective clarity that can reveal what's actually happening, what's actually occurring in my reality, and that my own interpretation and consciousness is completely limited by that which I'm concerned with, that where I'm like, there's a struggle here. And the way that I think of this is basically the journey of the soul kind of struggling and dancing and trying to reconcile with the fact that its self-image doesn't exist. Its story of itself is just that. And beyond all of that, there's the actual reality of our path, the soul itself, our non-local, universal consciousness that doesn't actually ever die. That's leading the show. So the reason why you are here in human form, from a soul perspective, from the perspective of eternal consciousness, there's a directive, there's a purpose. But the soul on its journey of self-remembering is constantly trying to negotiate and navigate and figure out, okay, this is what I'm here for, and this is what I'm supposed to do, and this is what's supposed to happen, and I gotta make sure it happens, because if it doesn't happen, I'm gonna mess up, and I'll not fulfill my purpose. There's so much possessiveness that we create when we reflect upon our lives, every aspect of it. And I often find that on this path, the great Tao, life, is always kind of humbling us. It's always making us get lower to the ground, our agendas, our efforts, that what we think needs to be, what we think others need to be, what we think we need to be, our ideas, may be rooted in at some moment a sense of what's true, but then all this other stuff added. We're always kind of being lowered and lowered and lowered, so that something that's confident and clear and certain can arise. And the energy of confidence and certainty isn't something that the identity of the self-image inhabits. The energy of confidence and certainty itself is an expression of the soul being itself, the soul leading the way. And the self-image that creates is one that's sure. It can rest. It's not needing to defend. It's not needing to struggle. It's not needing to prove something. And there's no sense of rushedness. There's no sense of haste. There's no sense of there being a problem. When we start to perceive the actual directive of our life, what's actually happening, what actually wants to unfold, then we can understand. Just a reminder, there's someone here who's X50NZAJYD plus B1. Mute her. Mute her. Yeah. I can mute it for you.
You will have to mute this person.
I muted this person. That's right. I have the power. Okay, so when we actually begin to perceive the directive of our life, we realize that our own blossoming, our own awakening, whatever that is, it's one with our journey. It's built into the program. We don't need to strive to affect that because it's inherent to the directive of our own soul. So with all of our concerns, all of our worries, just beyond them is actually the possibility of a deep peace where we realize, okay, I'm here because there's evolutionary potential. That is the only real truth. That's the only directive. That's the only reality that has any meaning to me. That's the only thing I can really sink my teeth into, as actually having substance. Everything else is a fear. When we ground ourselves more fully in that, there's more of a willingness to listen, to become curious about every aspect of our life, and to become less invested in trying to resolve the seeming complexities of our life from the perspective of them being a real problem. And so I often feel that on the spiritual journey, the identity, our sense of self, is in a way realizing, like, the soul as it creates its sense of self is noticing that this is just a sense of self. It's just a story. And it becomes more curious about itself. We become more curious about ourselves when we're not so invested, not holding on so strongly to our existing convictions. Now, bringing this to the natal chart, there's such a fascinating array of energies going on here. We have, of course, the fact that you have your same natal chart your entire life. There's a physiological, emotional, ego level development and psychospiritual development that occurs for the soul in its human experience throughout its entire life as well. But the soul's chart, and if we think of the chart as the blueprint, the map of the soul's evolutionary journey, it says something really profound, and it says that from birth to death. It says no matter where you are, no matter what moment you're in life, this is your chart, meaning this is your reasons for being here. This can't change, it can't go away. It can't be given any more than it already exists, and it can't be taken so long as you're breathing. Having that perspective and kind of like having the felt sense of how real that is. Like, if you're still breathing here, there's still evolution, there's still growth. There's a lot of compassion, there's a lot of healing that is made accessible through that understanding, which means we have the ability time and time again to start over. And again, there's something humbling about that, because our sense of self, the ego, it wants to start over in the ways that it wants to. Okay, I'm going to write this person this letter and I'm going to marry them. And that might not happen. So the starting over, the getting back on our path, never really has anything to do with our ideas of what that looks like. And let's bring that to Pluto. That's really the notion of cooperation with evolution. And the energy, the sense of cooperating with evolutionary imperative is about returning to the reasons for being here. And it's never really about an objective, I'm going to do this defined thing. Sometimes it can be like that, but at the core, it's about the choice to return. And what does returning look like for any of us? It's abstract when we try to think about it from sort of the ego's point of view, but it's very literal when we think about it from the soul's point of view. It's the soul returning to itself. What happens, whatever happens, happens there. It's like the child coming home after wandering and trying to go all these other places. Now it's home. What happens? I don't know. It'll go to the bathroom. It'll make a meal. When we return back to our soul, it opens up the space. It gives permission for the soul directive to then lead the way. And we always know what to do. That confidence, that certainty that awakens, that arises, is unshakable. It can't be refuted. We don't have to question it. I'm hearing someone speaking. Let me just make sure I'm muting everyone. Hold on a second here. Oh yeah, mute. There you go. Okay, perfect. And I think this might be another good reason why this talk feels right for me. I'm witnessing so many people going through a dark night. At this particular juncture is for many souls carrying this energy of heaviness and lostness and confusion. And Mercury retrograde in Pisces will be helpful for kind of moving through that and dissolving that. There's so much power in what we call the dark night, which the way that I want to describe that is where the ego structure doesn't have any more juice. Whatever we were riding on, it's not working for us anymore. And basically the dark night experience is the edge where we have the opportunity to sort of accept that. It's like, oh God, I have no control over this. I was really wanting this to happen and I can't make that happen. I was really wanting to be this, but I can't. And so the loss of will, the loss of self-esteem, the loss of power, the loss of juice, the loss of motivation, loss of interest, all of that is so freaking precious. And let's look at the idea of the moon. Because the moon at its core is about how we all feel secure and at home. When the moon feels good, when we're feeling, when we're in a positive lunar relationship, there's a sense of safety. There's a sense of presence. Timelessness, I often feel, not in a Neptune way, but in a sense of I can rest, I can relax, I can abide here. I'm invited, I'm included, I'm safe. But when we're struggling through a dark night, when the personal will isn't working so much anymore, there's no juice in it anymore, on the level of the moon, whatever kind of moon signature we have going on in our chart, we're going to feel like we're not at home. Energetically, spiritually, emotionally, we cannot during those times feel completely settled in ourselves. It's because the moon, the same signature that speaks to how we feel home and safe and secure within ourselves, is also our self-image. It's how we know that we are we. I am me and you are you. It's how I have a sense of self. And so when we're moving through a phase of darkness, the hardest thing for the soul as it does this really special human thing is to care for itself. Because for most of us, self-care rides upon a conditional context. I will honor and love and care for myself so long as my sense of self can be fulfilled, so long as what I think I am is validated, so long as the things that I think I need are happening for me. But when our ego structure isn't being met, who do we nurture? Who do we feed? If we don't even like that ego structure, if that ego structure feels unloved, unwanted, if it feels like a failure, if it feels like it can't do it, how is it going to care for itself? Or how is the soul going to care for itself in this human form? And so that very dynamic of being a lunar being, being here on Earth, having an emotional body, and yet not being able to rely on it as actually having any objective validity or meaning, it takes us to a state of love. It takes us potentially to a place of, I have to care for myself, not because I understand who I am or I believe my story of who I am, or because things are working out the way I wanted to, or even because I like myself, not because of any particular ego structure. I have to care for myself because it's not about me. It's not about my ideas of me. It's about me. And that sense of me is something much greater than self-image. It's about my soul. It's about who I really am. These dark nights are oftentimes a launching pad to determine ourselves, to reference from a greater and clearer point of view, because nothing else works. And when we return to the soul perspective, the way we relate to the moon, to the ego structure is, I'm going to care for this human existence the way I need to, because this is where I am. This is the imperative. And this is what I choose. And this is the only option. I would only choose this. The only possibility for me in all of existence is right here and right now. And really getting that is a profound opening to eternity. It's a profound opening to something so deep that we can actually choose to live moment to moment on this path, in this body, and be in service to an eternal truth that's awakening and realizing itself. There's so much unconditional love and devotion in that. We often think of Pluto as commitment. Like you commit to someone, you commit to a life path, and through that commitment you merge and you become more, you awaken to latent power within yourself. On the deepest level, we all have committed to being here. We've all committed to this incarnation. We are a soul that has chosen to marry form. And until this marriage is complete, until it's consciously realized, there's always going to be some level of struggle. There's always going to be, for all of us, some sense of duality or dichotomy between our eternal self that goes in and out of incarnation and the temporal form and context and identity and everything that comes with this human experience. Part of this journey is the marrying of these two. What happens before this complete marriage? I mean, in a way, they already are married because here we are. But it's almost like the soul struggling with its beloved. It's like it's not wanting to fully accept the reality of its beloved, of who it's with, of what it signed up for. And so there's this love-hate relationship that we carry to ourselves, to the full package of our human existence, and thus to one another. It's literally like, two couples, they're seeing each other, they get married, and they really love each other, they have really great, passionate sex, and they're just like really into each other, and then they're just freaking triggered. It's like, I don't like it when you do that, and all the 10,000 ways that we can respond to that. I gotta get out of here, I gotta try to make you something else, I gotta try to change myself to make you better, whatever it might be. That's what we're doing. And we experience that, or subtly, the sense of, I just gotta get out of here. For some people, that's this desire to check out of the life itself. For others, it's like, I just need to check out one way or another. When we go to sleep, I often feel like when I go to sleep, there's a sense of, thank God that's over with. Whatever's been going on in my mind, finally going to sleep is like, oh, finally, a break from that. Or going into meditation, finally a break from that. wow, I just spent how many hours not here? And that sense of wanting to that love-hate relationship, wanting to run away, is just kind of facing the package of our life, the program, the directive of why we're here, and saying, no, 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 I don't want to open up to that. That will bring up some of my greatest fears, my greatest vulnerabilities, places within myself I don't want to look at. I know I married you, but this is a little bit too much for me. I can't be close to you. So that's the duality within Pluto. It's like, okay, this is a little bit too much. So that's the resistance. And when we're in the psychology of resistance, because in the way that I'm framing it, we're resisting the beloved, we're resisting this divine marriage, this unification with our life, with why we are here, with the total package of our existence. Because that's what's happening in resistance, our consciousness will naturally, automatically be directed towards everything that is not our path, which means there's going to become this huge shadow that's created because we're not meeting our marriage, we're not meeting our beloved. We're denying a part of who we are. We're denying the totality of our wholeness. And so we're going to miss her. We're going to miss him. We're going to miss it. We're going to feel like there's some core need that's not being met. And so that need will become a shadow, and we'll start seeking fulfillment of that need everywhere but where we really have it. When we start to understand the calling of the beloved, the calling of this sacred directive and life that we are to merge with here, then we start to understand what we need to do. And it's not so much about black and white, okay, I got to drop everything and just, rather our actions, our path can be informed from a greater understanding of what we need to do, where we need to go, what's next for us. Right? For the caterpillar, that might be finding a spot to spin the chrysalis, or it might be getting into the chrysalis and closing it off or whatever. Well, they're already in it. But that's the analogy. There's different steps we take. But knowing what steps to take is when we look at that shadow, we look at what we're craving, what we're needing, but we don't really know how to find it. We realize, oh, there's a path for me here. Our shadow really tells us what our soul's path is. It tells us exactly where there's something to embrace about ourselves. And a whole new field of possibilities becomes available for us when that happens. So those are some thoughts, and I want to invite everyone to jump in with any questions. You can type in the Q&A, and we can also unmute you. I know, Georgia, you had a question, so in a moment I'll invite you to share that. But I want to just take a moment and tune in because there's something else that's wanting to come. So it's going to take a moment. I have a really fun analogy for all of this. If a child goes on a trip with a parent, and the child is told, we're going to Disney World. They're driving there, and the child says, what's going to happen at Disney World? What's it going to be like? Are there going to be rides? Are there going to be people in costumes? And the parent tells the child about all the things that are going to happen. The child's never seen a Mickey Mouse person before. The child's never seen a roller coaster. The child never had cotton candy. So in the child's mind, these are things that it doesn't really know what it is yet, but it's like, ooh, this is real, and we're going there. This is really exciting. On the path towards getting there, it's so easy for that child to lose attention towards where they're actually going, where they're being taken. And the child can create a fit. It's like, I don't want to go anymore. This is too long. I'm not enjoying this. Or let's stop here. Let's go to this place instead. And all kinds of other ways of unconsciously actually trying to postpone the destination. And in a way, forgetting about that original excitement and not trusting the parent, not trusting, okay, you're taking me somewhere freaking cool. This is like the most exciting, in this analogy, the child forever has wanted to go to Disney World. It's like the only thing it can think about. But when it lets its mind wander into pettier places of, I don't like the way this seatbelt feels. I don't want to drive anymore. Whatever it might be concerned with, it loses the connection with the directive of the ride. And so in this analogy, we are the parent and we are the child, and the parent is the soul. And the child is the identity, the human experience that the soul is driving. And for the identity to remember that it's one with the soul, that it's a satellite, it moves where the parents drive. It's not going to go anywhere that its parents aren't going to drive the car towards. It's not in control. And yet it can kick and scream and make it really, really difficult. And for some of us in different phases in our life or different lives, it isn't necessarily a pleasant ride. But when we understand the directive and the nature of our beloved, what we're merging with, what we need to experience and go through, we can accept it. We can understand it's best for us. But I really love reflecting on the idea that the self-identity, the self-image is a satellite to the soul. But oftentimes the satellite starts to think that it's its own thing. But it never was. It's never separate from the soul. So we are never separate from the directive of our own lives. The idea of awakening, which we're all doing, and the way that I describe it, it's the soul awakening to itself. It's realizing that it is itself. That journey itself sometimes will take the form of going through experiences, experiencing loss, disempowerment, crisis, sickness, death, devastation, and not necessarily understanding or knowing why it's happening. There's a great grace and compassion to the awakening journey, or to the way that the soul guides its own self. But the soul in its human incarnation doesn't always understand this. It's forgotten the reasons. Sometimes we forget what we signed up for, what the directive is. And sometimes it just has to be that way, that a part of the evolutionary journey as the soul's remembering itself, which implies it doesn't remember, means it'll go through things and not have the complete perspective. It doesn't know why the car is driving this way when it's supposed to be going this way. In its mind, it's supposed to be going to Disney World, but why are we going in the other direction? Maybe it's because the parents need to stop by somewhere first and pick something up. Maybe they need to get gas at the gas station. Maybe the car needs some repairs. There are all kinds of reasons why things need to go in a certain way. I'll speak a little bit to Saturn, and then I'll see what kind of questions or anything that we want to kind of bring forth here. Saturn's a really important piece to speak about when I start thinking about spiritual awakening, because Saturn is form, Saturn is structural reality. So Saturn in our charts corresponds to where the soul is both incarnating within a set of conditions. Like here you are in your body. That's a limiting and defined context. These are the parameters of your reality. And you came into this life in a certain culture, certain parental environment, certain country. So we all come into this world with definition and parameters and limitations. And none of us are going to switch bodies. unless your consciousness is 100% rooted in its eternal self, in the eternal soul, things like switching bodies, and not even that. I mean, if you're rooted in the soul, you're only going to switch bodies if that's your program. Like, you're never going to do something, even when you're on a soul level of awareness, that's not in your soul program. But the proper way to understand that is you're the one choosing the program. So I want to speak to this for a moment. We often had the struggle with free will versus fate. It's a struggle and it's a confusing thing from the level of personality, because personality has no free will. It's 100% predictable. Ego structure, it's a satellite for the soul. It has absolutely no will upon its own. When the soul wants to change, the ego structure will change and new decisions will be made. In the children analogy, it's almost like the parents are the lead for the child. When the parents set a clear and focused vibration, the child will be excited. When the parents forget where it's going, that will reflect in the child getting all confused and worried and uncertain. We really can never speak about the soul and ego in separate terms. It's important to understand that. And so the idea of free will, and there's a question there, the idea of free will and choice from the point of view of the soul is absolute. There's 100% sovereignty and freedom when we are operating on a level of soul awareness. But that freedom is hard for us to understand, because that freedom isn't like, great, I can do anything I want to do. I can manifest 20 wives right now. The ego structure is going to invent all kinds of ideas of what freedom looks and feels like. But the freedom of the soul is its being itself, is the resting within its own self. And so the choices that it makes will only be choices that reflect its own self. It's always going to be the choice to be itself. For example, what kind of choice does Uranus make? It chooses itself. It's always going to be 100% itself. What kind of choice, even in nature, we can always look at the metaphor of nature. Can a dog choose to be other than itself? It's 100% in allegiance to its nature. And whatever it does, it's going to be doing it as a dog. So our freedom is in realizing the unique individuality and sovereignty and eternity of the soul. Each soul is a complete individual, and it's one with Creator. So it has the infinite power of creation, and it's completely unique. So the choices that we make on a soul level create its own unique set of experiences, its own path, its own galaxy, its own universe. So coming into Saturn, we have the structural reality, and the soul resonates with it as a reflection of its own interior consciousness. And it's about understanding how to cooperate with the limitations and the parameters that reflect where we're at. The rules, judgments, limitations, etc., all reflect the parameters of our own interior consciousness and where we're at, where we're starting off. And as we become more soul aware, we realize, as a sovereign soul being, what is the reality that I want to create? Which means we're going to be tuning into our unique path, the unique directive of our lives. And we'll realize, oh, this body is an amazingly synchronistic reflection of my soul individuality. They're one with each other. It's not just I'm a soul with a body. It's like they're very much one. And all of my relationships and all the structures of my life, they're all a perfect reflection of my soul reality. And when we become more soul aware, we realize, how do we want to condition and structure and form and mold and shape our structural reality according to our sovereign choice to follow the directive and path of ourself. So Saturn is where we learn to take authority for our lives. And when we become more awake, more conscious of ourselves on a soul level, we begin to inhabit and work with form in a way that reflects a more masterful, conscious intention to consciously live here on this earth in a way that reflects our sovereign creatorship, in a way that reflects our sovereign power and choice to do and create exactly as we will. And when we're operating from a soul awareness, our will is not a dichotomy between God's will. Our will is one with the cosmos. The soul's evolutionary directive and imperative for being here is one with existence. And when we touch base with that, we have the power of the universe at our backs. And that's where Saturn, if we do the work of becoming self-aware, is a powerful gateway for manifestation. Because it reflects us actually getting on board and being like, got it. This is what I'm here for. This is what I'm doing. This is what I'm going to work on. When we're doing that, we are resonating with a great larger truth that is the essence and form, the foundation of our being here. So I'll share one more thought, because I've received a lot of interesting dreams about the second stage of the spiritual awakening journey. So in evolutionary astrology, there's a beautiful understanding of different stages of awakening. As a soul becomes self-aware, it will enter into different phases, different paradigms. Relative to our awakeness, we're going to perceive reality in a completely different paradigm. And thus there's a completely different set of rules that apply to us at different stages. I want to speak about the first spiritual and second spiritual, because I feel like this is where a lot of souls are kind of journeying in this lifetime, potentially. A lot of souls in first spiritual, and there's a quality, there's an aspect to the first stage of the spiritual stages of working through self-doubt. And the self-doubt is basically the journey of the soul kind of getting clear about itself and what it's here for, what it needs to do. And there's a lot of struggle with giving away its power, giving its authority away, adopting ideas and beliefs that are then actually not authentic or a violation of what's true and natural for the soul. And kind of touching base with its path and being like, oh, I can't do that, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not ready enough. And it's all this stuff where the ego is trying to figure out how to be itself. It's like, I don't know, I'm just trying to do it right. I'm just trying to figure it out. What's happening is the self-image is kind of just being put in its place. Towards the end of the first stage spiritual, the soul is starting to realize, oh, okay, got it. I am soul. I am clear and awake and aware and conscious, and I'm directing ego, I'm directing self to form and create this life accordingly. There is a growing understanding of, okay, one step at a time, this is what I'm here to do. I'm going to get clear and practice tuning into the path of my soul. The path of awakening is never, ever about just sit and meditate or just do this practice. The path of awakening for each soul is, for all of us, it's following our path. We're going to have practices and techniques and traditions that we're all going to resonate with in some way or another, but not for their own sake. Right? Their purpose is to bring awareness back to itself. Their purpose is the training and the practicing and the orientation of the soul abiding in itself. So we have all of these tools and techniques, but to actually get to a place where there's a genuine curiosity about oneself. What is true about my life? What is true about me? What am I? When that becomes a primary orientation, we start to live more clearly, more consciously in this life, from this place of, I am drawn to feel into where my path really wants to go. It's not a personal thing. It's, where do I as a soul want to go? Where does my path want to go? Where is it leading me? Where's life calling me? What's this program? And so there's less of a struggle with the ego. It's more about, okay, wait, what's happening here? It's kind of like the child. In this, it's a dualistic analogy because I'm separating the parents and the child, and really, in truth, the parents and the child are one. So that's important to say. all analogies are sort of short-sighted in that way, I guess you can say. But in this analogy, it's a matter of the child sort of quieting down and actually saying, hey, where are we going? What's actually happening? What's actually happening here? And then we start walking a path. And that path for many souls can be different. You can be in the first stage spiritual, have a directive to start teaching, to be a healer, to set up practices, to start writing books, to set up a yoga studio, to open up different paths of service in the world, whatever. I'm just naming a bunch of random selections. There can be all kinds of possibilities of manifesting a spiritual outward life, quote unquote. Or in the overwhelming majority of people, it's just live your life, family, job, career, and do your practices, but work on what you're needing to work on. The path of awakening within the first spiritual isn't necessarily one way or another. It's not necessarily about an outwardly expressive spiritual life, and it might be, and one isn't more spiritual than the other. And when the soul moves into the second stage of the spiritual stages of evolution, at that point, there's already been the experience of the soul experiencing itself as itself, and there are different levels of abiding in that. And some of the dreams that I've received about this is really, I'm grateful for this information because it's been really helpful for me in just understanding that there's value and there is beauty and importance in every stage. Now, Jeff Green has taught about the second stage spiritual as a time where awakening begins to happen. And it's at that time where the soul's aware of itself as itself, but there's still karma, there's still unresolved desire, there's still more journeying to go. And that's where there's a potential of a spiritual ego. And we have zillions of examples of teachers in that stage that have a big following, but have been misusing their sexual energy, have taken advantage, have manipulated people, all kinds of abuses of power, or have martyred themselves trying to help others. It's basically a stage where the ego can become intoxicated, thinking that it is the soul, where the soul forgot that the ego is just an instrument and it's still evolving. Important for the soul to continue to direct its consciousness towards itself, towards the source. But what I received, what I think is really cool, is during that phase, there's an imperative for the soul to express its awakening in one form or another. It's necessary for the soul at that stage to manifest and bring into expression their spiritual realization. Because what that is it's a way of further integrating it and experiencing it and coming to know it and understand it. But the key is to not get lost in that. To the phase of being a teacher, the phase of having students, the phase of being well known, whatever might happen, all of that's a phase. None of it is the end. None of it's really the destination of the soul. And I think during this time on the planet, we were resolving a lot of mistaken patriarchal ideas, where we put the guru as up here. We can see that, oh yeah, our brothers and sisters get to a point, we all get to a point where we start to realize that we are eternal consciousness. And then it's like, play. You're at Disney World, play, enjoy it, do it, share about it, write about it, talk about it, experience it, live in it. There's a beautiful, something really beautiful about that. And we can recognize souls that are doing that who have a lot to offer us, a lot of value, a lot of teachings, a lot of wisdom. And it's beautiful because these souls are very accessible. The second stage spiritual souls, because they're in a phase where they are needing to kind of connect and explore and taste and feel and experiment with their own self, they become a lot more accessible to the world. They're out there. Souls in the third stage aren't always as accessible in the ways that second stage. Third stage souls are very accessible. They're almost everywhere all the time. But in a very tactile, physical form, verbal, human way. Second stage spiritual souls are often much more accessible. they're speaking a lot more. Right? Ramana Maharshi at the third stage spiritual, he didn't speak because he recognized that the highest teaching is silence. But for a lot of souls in the second stage, they need to use a lot of words because they're wanting to explore it and experience it and develop it and further deepen their realization. So we can appreciate that and be like, oh, cool, you're at that stage. Awesome. But not give our power away, not for one moment believe or think that there's some kind of special authority that these souls have just because they've awakened to a deeper understanding of truth than maybe many other people have. And in demystifying that, I really want to present a notion of spiritual awakening that is sort of just normal. Like, it's a no big deal. The more NBD we are about it, the more no big deal we are about spiritual awakening, the more we can see that it's all something that we're doing. We're all walking each other home. We're all on the same path. We're all reflections for one another. And the more unrelatable, inaccessible someone is to us, we have to look at, one, where are we creating a separation and not honoring the validity of our own path? And two, where might they be hiding under a persona or an image of higher than? Because neither of those are true. Okay, so those are some thoughts that have been moving through me. And let's keep that there. And Georgia has a question, so let's take a look at that. No, Georgia, I want to hear your voice. It's been forever, so let's do that. Let me get you on. I'm unmuting you.
Hello?
Hi, Georgia.
Hey, can you see me as well?
I see you.
Oh my gosh, hi! Hey, I'm so happy to see you.
You.
I'm so happy. Oh my gosh, I'm like, my heart's exploding. I'm so excited. I haven't seen you since Astrology Rising, right? Like, that's when we saw each other last face to face.
Yeah.
It's so good to see you. Oh my gosh. This is awesome. It's like taking down the wall, because I'm always watching your videos and really appreciating your guidance always from afar. And now it's real. I'm seeing you, speaking to you. So, and this is so beautiful, by the way. Like, I'm sure I speak for everyone who's present right now and who'll watch the recording. This is so deeply profound. I've taken so many notes. And I'm kind of limited, I suppose, in true kind of Mercury, Piscean energy and fashion in general. I'm kind of reducing like how much information I'm consuming, you know, like how many articles I'm reading, and just trying to listen and tune into my own self, which of course a lot of fear can arise around that, right? Like quietening the mind, going into a still space. But you are someone who, you know, I really appreciate the wisdom that you offer, and it's really helpful for me. And it's amazing. The reason I brought up this question, and that I, you know, immediately I saw that you were doing this talk, and I wanted to write something because I've been meditating on this today, and it's come up so deeply for me and so viscerally. And essentially, it's very Neptunian, and that, in talking about dreams, I've had a lot of dreams recently where the visual, the imagery, the symbolism has been just around oceans enveloping me, you know, tsunami waves destroying cities and kind of apocalyptic. And then in my waking life, this has been mirrored in actual sort of waves of like visceral fear and anxiety rising in my body. And I've experienced a lot of depression in my life. I have a lot of Neptunian signatures, and I've had a lot of Pluto transits in my life. But I never really experienced anxiety, and then haven't for a long time. And what's happened is this feeling of anxiety and fear, where all of a sudden I'm out of my body, right? And I'm in my brain, and the ego is going nuts, creating stories and tapes of fear for sure about, and essentially it's very like connected to what I'm reading and what I'm thinking about in relation to both the narrative of climate change, of like what's happening with climate change on the planet, more like climate emergency, and really the devastation is likely going to be a lot more and a lot more intense and a lot closer than a lot of us have previously thought. And also around the 2020 conjunctions, economic crisis as well, by the way, but also the 2020 conjunctions, which I've been living with and thinking about. I've had post-it notes on my wall for like since like 2016, you know, feeling into what that will be. And I've been kind of preparing myself mentally, emotionally, and how I might reorientate my life and my path around what I feel 2020 and now might bring up for us. But all of a sudden, yeah, this kind of, I thought I've done a lot of work in the last few years to deal with the Pluto and evolutionary and awakening issues of change, in terms of settling into not, how do I say this, not getting too much up and into my ego and into my fear mind again when it comes to my relationships with others. I'm able to calm that. I'm able to come back to center. I'm able to not feel threatened in my existence, I suppose. But now all of a sudden, I'm just being completely taken out of my body and into the Neptunian realms, I suppose, where I'm thinking about the global issue and everyone's suffering, and how climate emergency and economic crisis, etc., isn't gonna touch maybe the lives of all of us. And I have to say something that just to specifically speak to something you brought up is, you spoke about how when we get into that soul place and that soul centeredness, there's no haste, there's no rushness, there's no struggle. And immediately, I mean, there's such a truth to that, and I feel like I've been cultivating that for years. But now, for me and for all of us, I think the narrative that we're hearing when it comes to climate emergency, right, is such a feeling of we should be alert, we should be awake, we should feel a sense of crisis. And so all of the fears are just kind of exploding, and fears that I'm not used to. And I am really, really struggling. And the only thing that I've really connected with today, just to kind of bring it back to why this is so relevant right now and to your talk, is, and I love that you've spoken so much to Pluto, because that's actually what resonated with me. I'm like, okay, this is Pluto. It's like, the more you resist, the more difficult this is going to be. Like, the Plutonian times are coming, but it's something in me is resisting. And then I had this moment, I was walking by the ocean, of course, and I just had this stillness, and my soul completely calmed down to the point that I was like reduced to tears, where I remembered that about my journey and my chart. And I have my Pluto polarity point. My Pluto's at 20 degrees of Scorpio. My Pluto polarity point is conjunct my moon. My moon is at 22 degrees of Taurus, which is trine 22 degrees of Pluto, 22 degrees of Capricorn, where Pluto is right now. And I thought to myself, what if all this 2019, 2020 action, there's a kind of harmonizing and being in service of my soul, and my emotional journey on this planet, and what I'm here for. I suppose the thing I want to ask is, what if part of this soul's journey and part of this process and why we're here and this awakening process is actually confronting perhaps our own death? Like, what if the very real destruction and devastation that is coming before us in the service of true change? I mean, absolutely, this is kind of a real transformative process, which could be exciting. But what if this brings like a lot of death in our lives, and also out? But what if it brings the end of our own lives? These are kind of some of the things that have been coming up for me. And I know that's a lot, by the way. I'm fully aware. That's a deep, wide thing. It's just, I was thinking about how increasingly collective that question is going to become, as we talk more about climate and economics. So yeah, thank you for listening to me share. And I thought that you, if of all people, you're someone I would love to, I don't know, speak to some of that, or if that's come up for you at all. I'm not sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. I'm also by the ocean right now. Maybe I can somehow show everyone. Let's see. I can't see my.
Oh my gosh, you're in your van. That's something. Oh, there's a reflection I can't fully see.
Oh, okay, forget it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you're like facing the ocean in your van.
Yeah, there's ocean right here. I'm at a little. You can see the ocean on two sides. It's really great.
Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh. That's the freedom of you in your van. You can be in whatever environment you want.
Yeah, and I got a little Wi-Fi extender. So it takes the Wi-Fi signal, this is good for anyone to know, and it expands it. It takes the cell service and expands it into a Wi-Fi signal. It'll make the videos a lot better.
I watched your van tidbits YouTube video of like tips and tricks for van life, and I was like, yes, Ari. I soaked that up. It was awesome to watch. I loved it.
So a few points that I'll speak to. One, the last one around like maybe this is about humanity confronting its own death. I think that is definitely a reality. I don't feel that there's going to be a mass extinction, but I absolutely feel like this is a part of the journey right now. And I want to say that the difference between like this created hastiness of like false immediacy versus there being this expedient reality and imminence to address, like there's a real difference. And in a way, like we could have a spiritual emergency where we're like, I need to know myself. There's oftentimes in our own personal path a feeling of life or death. It's like, I can't continue what I've been doing anymore. And so the expediency isn't like a hasteful, I gotta figure out how to make more money kind of thing. It's more of an experience of I need to know myself, and then nothing else becomes important. And I feel like collectively that's also what's happening when it comes to climate emergency. We're realizing, oh, this is real. Like this shit is actually happening. And let me maybe share my chart, and I'll just show for everyone the transits.
Oh, yes.
There's no doubt about it. 2019 is sort of like the beginning of 2020. So it's some of the most cataclysmic and sort of like powerful transit alignments that we've ever seen in our lifetime. Okay, share screen. Okay. So here we are with March 2019. Just to point out, down here in the second house, we have, in this particular moment in time in Oregon, I'm in California right now, we have Saturn and Pluto conjunct along with the South Node in Capricorn. This year and next year, Saturn and Pluto will be crossing over the South Node. They will be crossing over each other, rather, this year. This year is the South Node, and the next couple of years they'll be moving with each other. And then Saturn enters Aquarius. The alignment of Saturn with Pluto, it's ending a phase. Saturn balsamic Pluto. Saturn's moving towards Pluto. This is the completion of a cycle. And it's beginning a new cycle, which means there's an ending of Capricorn, the structures. And we've been hearing about this for several years, but we're actually beginning this right now. And this is happening on the South Node of Saturn and Pluto, which is also in Capricorn. To me, what this really represents is a timing of collective evolution. There are phases when you have transits like this that speak to the pulse of evolution in a collective. That means all souls evolve, all souls incarnate now are in for this program. If you're here now, this is a part of your program. Doesn't matter what kind of chart you have, this is what you've signed up for. And I think it is very possible there'll be a lot of really big changes on all levels. And in terms of the fear and the dread that you spoke to, I'm not going to speak directly about that for you. I just recognize that everyone, of course, a lot of people are experiencing that. And I've also had dreams about this time period my entire, like I've known about this since I was a child. Nor do I want to project any kind of like prediction, right? But I've always felt this imminence about this time in the world, and also this particular time in my life. It's always felt like some shift is happening, some important shift. And there's a big Pluto lesson in all of this. It's like, yeah, it's all impermanent. Like all of this is going to end. All of this is going to fall away at a certain point. And there's something really powerful about this. Like anything we're really attached to, we're going to also find ourselves struggling with letting it go, and also struggling with caring for it. Like anything that we're really attached to, we're not going to love and care for. It's an interesting psychology, because we're almost like, maybe attachment is even the best word. Anything that we take for granted, that we just kind of settle upon, that we depend upon, rather, that's a better word. Anything that we depend upon, that we don't want to change, when it breaks down or when it's no longer there, we'll go through a crisis. It's like, I was thinking this morning when I was lying in my bed on my phone, I'm like, oh, this is so comfortable, just in my bed, scrolling Facebook. And I thought, man, if my phone didn't work right now, I would be really angry. I would be really frustrated. And I would be like, oh, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna do all this work? And it's like I also felt like, damn, I don't want to like have nothing to do with my mind. I was like, this is a really great distraction for me, and I don't want to have to deal with me not being able to just kind of numb out on my phone if it broke or if I didn't have it. What would I do with myself? So I was aware of like, okay, this is kind of telling me not to kind of lose my sovereignty, not to like lose my alignment and my become just like blindly dependent on anything in my life, just kind of being what it is. So it's interesting. What that birthed for me is like, I'm grateful for my phone.
Mm.
While I have it, I'm so grateful to use it because I know I have pretty much no control over it. I don't know how the fuck it works. Like how it's beyond me. Anything that we have no control over that we're just using, if we don't have a relationship of gratitude for it, when it stops working, we're going to have an identity crisis. We've been depending on it. And same thing with our relationships, and same thing with this earth. If we love, if we appreciate, if we give thanks and offer our gratitude to anyone and anything and the earth that we're living on, if we can feel like I'm so grateful for this, which really says like I'm grateful to be here as a soul in this body, in this life, I'm grateful for this program, then we can let ourselves enjoy it. We can let ourselves enjoy the things and the people and the pleasures of this life. And at the same time realize if it ends, it's going to be okay. Like when our heart is open, endings are okay. And I think that's just an important quality for us right now. Fighting climate change and the haste, the immediacy that I'm seeing in the world is healthy, but there's one danger in it, is if there's no gratitude, right? If we forget that this is a blessing, that life is a blessing, and all of this can go, right? This didn't have to exist. None of this is eternal. So to have that perspective is really important. Is there anything else that you wanted me to speak to in your share?
No, that really, that is so soothing and affirming and centering to hear you speak on that, because yeah, I think as well, it's so imminent for me, it's so present for me, and I love that you made the distinction straight away about the difference between like spiritual emergency and like kind of a kind of ego formed emergency of what do I have to do now. So, and that's really, yeah, that really resonates for me, and I want to like, yeah, make the distinction in the future. And I just also want to say that the gratitude aspect is huge, because yeah, I think that it has ignited more of a gratitude. I have to say that, you know, in terms of this being a story, and there is a kind of redefining of story, of narrative, of the narrative that like cuts into the depths of like, it goes right to the roots of our sense of self, of our economy and the values underneath our economy, our society. So it's all very Capricornian and redefining of that. And you know that I've been working for a long time on on creating something called Sacred Society, an organization around, and it's very much in connection with this author, writer, thinker, Charles Eisenstein, and his work with sacred economics. And he actually just did release a book called Climate, A New Story. And I think that in that there is more of a spiritual emergency. I love that term, with the whole climate thing, where it's like more of a questioning of like, who are we? And the redefining of, oh, like the earth is living and sentient and is alive, and we are inextricably connected to her. And so it all comes back to gratitude, like, oh my God, we have forgotten to be thankful for the gift that is life. I just suppose that the only thing I want to speak to is that what happens, that I've gone into this gratitude now, where every morning I'm like just basking in it, because I'm so aware of the impermanence of it now. It's so imminent in my consciousness every day of how it might so quickly go away, is gratitude. But then what happens is the heart breaks, because all of a sudden I have this more deeper gratitude for every little beautiful detail of this gift of life. And then it's like, oh my God, and look at what's happening to the planet, and I have no control like over that, like no mass control, and I want to save her, and I want that life to keep existing, my God, you know. And that is really heartbreaking. I suppose I just really do trust in what you have to say, that it really, actually, I think this is like a necessary part of awakening us all to that gratitude and to that, like, yeah, to this gift of life and of the earth, and that, you know, this is like a necessary Plutonian part of the process. Yeah. So, yeah, as heartbreaking as it is, it's heart opening, right?
There's so much heartbreak in it. I so get that. It's heartbreaking. Like, gratitude breaks our hearts. Like, when I think about my van, when I feel like I'm taking for granted my life or my body or my van, and I return to like sort of a very humble starting point of I have this, and I get to receive this and be supported by this. Then there's like so much tenderness and like hurt in that as well. It hurts a lot.
I know. Over the simplest thing, you know, you said about your phone, that's so present for me right now. Just, this is a gift that I have that. That's amazing. And then it feels, and you kind of like feel regret as well for all of the beautiful things in your life that have been gifts that you haven't been grateful for. And it's kind of overwhelming. And it's, I suppose it's that whole heartbreak means that the heart opens, you know, but it's really hard. It's so painful.
One thing that I'm learning about the heartbreak is also that becomes a motive for us to share ourselves. It's like that heartbreak where we realize the preciousness of our life and how easy it is to take it for granted. It sort of reflects on a deeper level the deep knowing that all of this is our beloved. Like we're married to our body, we're married to our earth, we're married to our like all of that which is one with our life is our marriage partner. And it just I find that it makes us want to give ourselves to it more. So that heartbreak actually is a way of us connecting with and tuning in directly from inside our own soul directive, what our path is, what's our dharma, because that's what brings us forward to share and to be the medicine that we are in our lives.
Yes. So would you say focusing on the North Node in many ways or the Pluto polarity point is a part of that? Like of really,
natal North Node?
Yeah, like really kind of tuning into that at this time, I suppose now more than ever, I imagine. But
sure, like in our natal charts, the North Node as a general rule will correspond to, you know, the kind of form the soul's wanting to inhabit, the kind of self-image structure, ego structure that wants to be developed for the soul's directive. But of course, it's like we have to look at the whole chart.
Yeah. Of course. So sorry. I just
dynamic.
heard someone speaking on that today about focusing on the North Node, and it sounded really simplistic to me. And I was like, maybe I should do that. You know, it's like, again, perhaps the ego trying to find a focus of, you know, rather than, but it's actually the whole chart, the whole experience.
Well, your North Node's Capricorn, right?
Yeah, in the 12th house, conjunct Uranus.
Oh, well, how's that for your heart breaking open for the collective and and not knowing, and that sense of responsibility. So there's a lot. It's juicy. It's a big one for you for sure. Lots to see there. I mean, my North Node's in Gemini in the 9th house, so get up on class and talk.
Which was so doing.
Okay, so we have another Zoom meeting starting. So in that case, let's start closing up. Anyone have any other questions? I'll give it another 15 minutes or 2 to see if anyone else wants to share anything else.
And thank you so much, Ari, for speaking to my question. I appreciate it so deeply.
It's such a joy to see you again. Thank you.
I know. It feels like you've just been in the same room as me. I've just really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Do you want me to turn off now to leave that space for someone else, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So great. I don't think we have any more questions. So we're gonna end it here. If I had a song, I would sing it. Do I have a song? Okay,
Oh.
one song. Give me one moment. Grabbing my guitar. That heartbreaking feeling and Georgia were talking about. That's me with music. It's like, oh no, if I don't sing, not necessarily right now, but like with my life. Okay. תאמין שיכולים לתקן. אם אתה מאמין שיכולים לקלקל, תאמין שיכולים לתקן. If you believe you can break it, you must believe you can fix it. If you believe you can break it, you must believe you can fix it. In this perfection, the truth, there is no shame, there is no blame. In this forgiveness, the truth, you are well, you are holy. In this perfection, the truth, there is no shame, there is no blame. In this forgiveness, the truth, you are well, you are holy. אם אתה מאמין שיכולים לקלקל, תאמין שיכולים לתקן. אם אתה מאמין שיכולים לקלקל, תאמין שיכולים לתקן. If you believe in your sickness, you must believe in your wellness. If you believe in your sickness, you must believe in your wellness. In this perfection, the truth, there is no shame, there is no blame. In this forgiveness, the truth, you are well, you are holy. In this perfection, the truth, there is no shame, there is no blame. In this forgiveness, the truth, you are well, you are holy. If you believe in your lostness, you must believe you are found. If you believe in your lostness, you must believe in this moment. אם אתה מאמין שיכולים לקלקל, תאמין שיכולים לתקן. אם אתה מאמין שיכולים לקלקל, תאמין שיכולים לתקן. 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 Thank you all for joining me. Much love to you all. Enjoy the retrograde journey.